All right, we're here with Robert from Socialist Alternative. We're going to ask him some questions about exactly what brought him to the organization and what they do. All right, Robert, what can you tell us about SA to open up with?
Thanks for having me today, James. So Socialist Alternative is part of an international organization called the Committee for Workers International. We have sections in 45 countries, and Socialist Alternative is the organization here in the United States. It's been around for about 30 years now, and has changed names and gone through a lot of different changes. Currently, things that Social Alternative is working on is a fight for 15 through the 15 Now movement, which has helped get the $15 minimum wage passed in Seattle. And we currently have a council member in Seattle City Council named Shama Sawant. And we're engaged in all kinds of other struggles too.
All right, well, we can't help but ignore the socialist part of Socialist Alternative. What kind of drives the group towards socialism? What separates them from a traditional capitalist party like the Democrats and the Republicans?
Social Alternative is trying to provide an alternative to the two-party system. The two-party system has dominated in the United States for well over 100 years, and right now I think there's no better time for a socialist group. People are rejecting the two-party system, and we need an alternative to that two-party system. So Social Alternative is out there to show that what the Democratic Party and Republican Party stand for is not standing for the millions of workers we have here in the United States. We have increasing poverty, climate issues that those two parties are not addressing, and one thing we want to do is address those issues that deal with everyday workers and not just the billionaires.
All right. Now, you happen to be setting up a new branch here in Cincinnati, and we happen to live in a relatively conservative city. What is it like to try to get a group going here? Have you met any difficulties, or has it been mostly open arms?
It was at first, for me, I've been a member for 2 years, and joining Social Alternative, I had no activist experience, let alone understanding of socialism until I joined and tried to work through those things. So after learning about socialism and learning about activism, then I started reaching out and wanted to build a branch with others. And even though it is kind of a conservative city here in Cincinnati, a lot of people are angry and they're looking for an alternative. And I've had a big echo for that. A lot of people interested. And right now we're trying to build with 10 members, which is a huge breakthrough because I was the only member for 2 years. And now with those 10 members, we can start building on different movements and things like that. But it's definitely been received positively in the working class neighborhoods.
Good to hear. So what do you see the next 2 or 3 years for Cincinnati Social Alternative? What do you see them transforming into and growing, and projects that you see to them taking up?
For the next 2 years or in the future, Social Alternative, it also depends on what's going to happen in the United States. We have to prepare for any big changes, just like the run with Bernie Sanders was we knew what was happening, we knew he was going to run, but we didn't know how big it was going to become. So in the future, we don't know what it could bring, but we want to be prepared for, the way capitalism develops could bring more devastation, and we want to be able to provide alternative voices inside the crisis that capitalism is sure to bring. But more specifically here in Cincinnati, we would definitely want to raise up talking about the $15 minimum wage. Is that something we can do here and build on? And any other kind of local issues that people are concerned with, we want to build and work on as well.
What would you say to people who would tell you that the $15 minimum wage would suddenly create large-scale unemployment from small business owners not being able to keep up and the like?
That's always one of the first things you hear when people talk about minimum wage, let alone a $15 minimum wage, is that it's going to hurt unemployment, or it's going to hurt employment, and it's going to cause widespread unemployment, and it's going to make it worse for people. But the reality is that's not true. It's not even a relevant argument anymore. They've done research and studies about minimum wage and the impact it has. And quite frankly, there's just no evidence that minimum wage increase hurts jobs. And you can look at Seattle for an example. They've passed the first $15 minimum wage, and the sky has not fallen. People still have jobs, and in fact, employment has risen. And with no real crisis is coming from that minimum wage hike.
Speaking of Seattle, I know that's where the movement got its form and sort of came into tuition, and it's where one of your more charismatic leaders comes from. Would you like to talk a bit about her and if she's influenced your views as a socialist?
Yeah, I guess you're talking about Shama Sawant. And Socialist Alternative actually started in New York City, but we've had a really big development in Seattle. And one thing about Shama Sawant is she was a part of the Occupy movement. And the Occupy movement was a huge explosion of activism for people, the first time getting active and angry at the 1% and raising up this banner for the 99%. And Shama Sawant was a part of that movement. And one thing we wanted to do is provide demands. What are the demands of this movement? What are we trying to see? And through that, she raised her campaign as an open socialist, not part of the two-party system. She ran as a Socialist Alternative member and received over 90,000 votes in 2013, showing that you can run outside the two-party system and receive a lot of support in working-class communities. And then again, she got reelected in 2015 with thousands of votes as well as an open socialist. So you can run as a socialist. It's okay to talk about socialism now. And Shama's shown that in Seattle.
Do you have much hope for more socialist candidates starting to gain ground over the next couple of years? And if so, what sort of leads you to believe that?
Yeah, we've already seen some people like Bernie Sanders, for instance, calling himself a socialist, and other candidates that are starting to call themselves democratic socialists that are running. And while we support that, calling yourself a socialist, we believe those people should also run outside the two-party system. And we're starting to see that some people are questioning, do they run as a Democrat or can they run as an independent socialist outside the two-party system? And I think that's going to develop in the United States. And we need to discuss that and talk about building our own party of the 99%.
All right. And before we leave off here, do you have any suggestions for people who are trying to create their own post-capitalist movement or trying to start up a branch of a organization in a new town and they don't really have any place to get started? How do you gain traction?
It's a really good question. I find that a lot of people like myself, new to this, new to alternative politics and new to activism, sometimes you don't know where to start. But first thing to do is find out who in your area is talking about politics and talk to those people. Go to rallies, meet people. It doesn't matter where you're from. If you're in rural Kentucky or a city like Cincinnati, there's always people willing to talk about politics, and it's okay to go out to those people and reach them and talk and have those open debates and discussions. And there's tons of organizations in the United States that are building different movements, whether it's minimum wage or healthcare or other types of fights that are going on. I think people should seek those out and not be afraid to meet those people and build with them.
That's a good point. I think all of us could do to reach out a bit more to our fellow socialists and see how we can get this thing off the ground. Well, thank you for joining us, Robert.
Thank you, James.